Ladies and gentlemen, this is my daughter, the one who wipes strangers' backsides for a living. That's what my father said into a gold-plated microphone in a ballroom he'd rented for $40,000, with 200 investors holding champagne they hadn't paid for. He said it the way you'd announce a punchline, with his chin up and his eyes already scanning the room for the laugh. And he got it. He always got it. What he didn't get, what nobody in that room knew, was that I'd spent the last 4 months building the rope he was about to hang himself with, and that I was the only person in the state of Ohio who could shut down every single facility with his name over the door. But before I tell you how I did it, do me a favor. If your own family has ever made you feel small in a room full of people, drop a word in the comments. I need to know I wasn't the only one. I really do. I want to take you back to that ballroom because the way it felt matters more than what I said. I had come in through the kitchen. That detail is going to seem like nothing now, but hold on to it. I came in through the service entrance because the Valley line wrapped around the block and I didn't want to make a scene arriving late. So I walked in, past the dishwashers and the trays of stuffed mushrooms, and my one good dress, the navy one I'd bought on clearance 2 years ago and kept for funerals and emergencies. I slipped into the back of the room just as my father was working the crowd, and he saw me. Of course he saw me. He has radar for the one person who can make him feel less than the king of his own kingdom. He waved me up. Come here, he said, all warmth, all teeth. And like an idiot, like the girl I used to be, some small animal part of me thought, maybe. Maybe tonight is the night. Maybe he's finally going to say the thing. I walked up to the little stage they'd built under a banner that read, "See Hatter, Hose Dalian, and You're Living, a New Standard in Care." He put his arm around me, and I could smell the bourbon under his cologne, and he leaned into the mic. This is my daughter, he said. She had every advantage, private school, a trust fund I personally funded, and do you know what she does now? He paused for the timing. He was always good at timing. She changes diapers on people who can't remember their own names. She mops up after the dying. I sent her to be a leader, and she became a janitor for the half-dead. The room laughed, not all of it, but enough. Enough that I felt the heat climb up my neck and into my ears the way it had 1,000 times before, at 1,000 dinners, at my college graduation he didn't come to, at the hospital when my mother was dying and he took a call about a zoning variance in the hallway. Enough that I understood, standing there under those lights, that he would never stop. Not at 60, not at 80, not at his own funeral. He would find a way to make me the joke even from the casket. And that was the moment something in me went very, very quiet. You know that quiet. The dangerous kind. The kind that isn't sad anymore. I reached up and I took the microphone out of his hand. He let me. He was so sure of what came next. A tearful little speech, a daughter begging for scraps of approval, that he just smiled and stepped back and gestured to the crowd like, "Watch this, watch her embarrass herself." The investors leaned in. "My father's right about one thing," I said. My voice didn't shake. I was almost surprised by that. I do work with people the rest of the world has decided to throw away. I've held the hand of a man who fought at Khe while he cried because he couldn't find his way back to his own bed. I've fed women who built this country with their hands. So yes, that's my work. A few people clapped, uncertain. My father's smile started to curdle. He didn't like the room looking at me. But he forgot to give you my title, I said, so let me. I looked out at the 200 faces, the men in their good suits, the wives in their good jewelry, the reporter from the Business Journal in the 3rd row with her phone already out. I'm a senior program integrity investigator for the State Department of Medicaid, I said. I hold the licensing authority over long-term care facilities in 11 counties. And the new flagship my father is about to ask you to invest in, Cedar Hollow, the one on the banner behind me, cannot legally accept a single Medicaid resident, which is 80% of his revenue, without my signature. You could hear the air conditioning, That's how quiet it got. You could hear the ice settling in 200 glasses. My father's face did something I'd never seen it do in 29 years. It went slack. The performance fell off it like a mask coming loose at one corner, and underneath was just a scared old man doing math. "Tessa," he said off mic low, "sit down." "I drove out to 3 of your facilities this week," I said, and I pulled a folder out of my bag. A plain manila folder. I'd carried it in past the dishwashers. "I did an unannounced survey. Want me to read the room my findings, Dad? Or do you want to keep introducing me?" He reached for the microphone. I stepped back, just one step. On the heels, I'd resold twice, and he stopped, because 200 people were watching, and he was still, at his core, a man who would do anything to avoid looking like he was wrestling a woman for a microphone at his own gala. So I read, "Maplewood Manor, your memory care unit in Lakewood. State requires 1 direct care staff member for every 8 residents on the night shift. On the 3 nights I pulled the time clocks for, you ran 1 for every 19. 1 aide. For an entire locked dementia ward." I flipped a page. The paper was loud. A woman, named in my report only as resident 14, fell trying to get to the bathroom at 2 in the morning because the 1 aide on the floor was on the other end of the building. She lay on the floor for 40 minutes. She broke her hip. She's 86. I let that sit. I watched a few of the investors set their glasses down. "You billed Medicaid $11,000 that month for her enhanced fall prevention program." "There is no program." I checked. "There's a laminated sign by the nurse's station that says, 'Be careful.'" Somebody in the back actually gasped. I'll never forget that. A small, sharp, involuntary sound. I turned another page slow. I wanted him to hear everyone. "Cedar Hollow, the building behind me, the new standard in care. Let's talk about the budget you sent the state to get your certificate of need." I looked up at the donors in the front. 62% of the construction budget went to the lobby, the restaurant, the wine cellar, and the executive suite on the top floor with the lake view. Do you know how much went to the call-light system? The thing a confused 90-year-old presses when she can't breathe at 3 in the morning? I held up 2 fingers, pressed close together. "Less than the landscaping. You spent more on the koi pond than on the equipment that keeps people alive." I closed the folder. The snap of it was the loudest thing in the room. "This isn't a senior community," I said. "It's a hedge fund with a chapel, and every dollar of it runs on people the rest of you have agreed not to look at." I set the microphone down on the podium, gently, because I'm not the kind of person who slams things. And I turned, and I walked off that little stage. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I walked past the koi pond he'd built with money meant for call lights, and out the doors I'd come in through, past the stuffed mushrooms and the dishwashers, and one of the dishwashers, a kid, maybe 19, looked at me, and I have no idea what was on my face. But he gave me a tiny nod, like he knew, like he'd heard the whole thing through the wall. For 29 years, I'd been the embarrassment, the cautionary tale, the daughter who'd thrown it all away. And for about 90 seconds in that ballroom, I was the only thing 200 people could see. I need you to understand how we got here, because if I just leave it there, it sounds clean, and it wasn't clean. Nothing about my family was ever clean. 10 years ago, I was 19, and I came home from my second year of community college, where I was taking night classes in social work and gerontology, and I told my father I wanted to work in elder care. We were in his study, the one with the leather chairs nobody was allowed to sit in. I had a brochure for a state-funded AIDS certification program. I was so proud of it. I folded it carefully so it wouldn't wrinkle in my bag. He took it out of my hands. He looked at it. And then he walked to the gas fireplace, turned the little key, and held the brochure to the flame until it caught. "You want to spend your life smelling like a nursing home," he said, watching it burn. "Fine. But understand something. You will not do it on my money. You will not do it under this roof. And you will not come to me in 5 years when you're broke and you're nothing, expecting me to remember I had a daughter." He dropped the last burning corner into the fireplace. "As far as I'm concerned, the girl I raised is finished. You walk out that door, you're finished too." So I walked out the door. I had $1,100 in a checking account and a duffel bag. I want to tell you it got easier fast. It didn't. I lived in a basement apartment that flooded every spring. I worked overnight shifts at a county nursing home, the kind of place my father wouldn't have let his dog die in. And I went to school during the day, and I slept in 90-minute chunks in the break room. I ate a lot of off-brand cereal for dinner because it was cheap and you could eat it dry on the bus. I learned to change a bed with a person still in it. I learned which residents would hit you and which ones would cry if you left. And I learned that those were often the same person. I held a man named Walter while he died at 4 in the morning because his kids lived in Arizona and couldn't get a flight. And I held his hand and I told him they were on their way even though they weren't, because that's what you do. You let a dying man believe the people he loved were coming. And I got my degree, and then my bachelor's, online, paying as I went, and then a master's in public administration, the same way, 3 classes a year because that's all I could afford, while I worked my way up. Aide to charge nurse's assistant, to compliance coordinator at the county level, to surveyor for the state, to investigator. 11 years. I never asked him for a dime. I changed my last name back to my mother's, Brandt, when I turned 22, partly out of spite and partly because I didn't want his name in my professional file. That turned out to matter more than I knew. Because here's the thing about my father. He's a man who has never once in his life Googled his own daughter. He didn't know my work. He didn't know my title. To him, I was a fixed point. The failure, the diaper-changer, frozen at 19 forever. He'd been telling the same joke about me at dinner parties for a decade. He never once imagined the joke could ever change. That blindness is the most expensive thing he ever owned. So when an application for state Medicaid certification crossed my desk 4 months ago, with my father's company name on it, and a building called Cedar Hollow, and a budget that made my stomach turn, I had a choice. I want to be honest with you about the choice, because it's the part I'm least proud of and the part I'd do again. I could have flagged it that day. I could have written a careful, professional letter. Application denied pending review. Deficiencies noted. Here is your appeals process. Clean, anonymous. He'd never even have known it was me. He'd have blamed the state, blamed some clerk, blamed the bureaucrats, and he'd have hired a consultant and a lawyer and found another way in. Men like my father always find another door. You don't stop them by closing one window quietly. So I didn't. I assigned myself to the file. I approved the preliminary paperwork. I let the certification move into the next round. I let him think it was going through. I watched him send out the gala invitations. I watched from a distance as he booked the ballroom and ordered the wine and called every investor in 3 states. I let him build the whole beautiful trap, and I waited for him to walk all the way inside it. And then I bought a ticket to my own father's gala with my own money, and I came in through the kitchen. You wanted an audience, Dad, I thought, watching him from the back of that room. So did I. Now here's where I thought it was over. I really did. I thought I'd say my piece and walk out into the parking lot and drive home and sleep for the first time in months. I thought the worst part was behind me. I was in the service corridor, the long, ugly one with the concrete floor and the smell of bleach, almost to the back doors, when I heard it, the crash of a door thrown open so hard it bounced off the wall. And then his footsteps, fast and heavy and wrong, the footsteps of a man who has never had to chase anything in his life. You stop right there. His voice had lost its polish completely. In the ballroom, he sounds like money. Out here, alone, it was just a raw, ugly thing, scraped down to the bone. I turned around. He was maybe 15 feet away and closing, and he looked terrible. His tie was loose, his face was a deep, blotchy red, and there was sweat on his forehead under the hallway's bad fluorescent light. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. He looked, for the first time in my life, afraid. He grabbed my arm. His fingers dug in hard enough that I'd find the bruises the next morning, 4 small ovals above my elbow. "You think you can do that to me?" he said, his face inches from mine. "In front of those people? In front of men I've known for 30 years? You ungrateful little," his voice cracked. "I gave you everything. I gave you life, and you stand up there and you try to destroy me." I looked down at his hand on my arm, then up at his face, and I didn't pull away, and I didn't flinch, and I think the not flinching scared him more than anything. "Take your hand off me," I said. "Or what?" He laughed, and it was wet and shaking. "You'll write a report? You'll file a complaint? You think your little clipboard means anything against me? I will make 3 phone calls, and you will never work in this state again. I will sue you for slander until you're back in that basement apartment you came from." And there it was, naked for once, the whole truth of him, finally out where I could see it. Because in that hallway watching him come apart, I finally understood something I'd had wrong for 10 years. I'd always thought he hated my work because it didn't make money, because it wasn't prestigious, because it embarrassed him at the club. But that wasn't it at all. That was never it. He couldn't stand my work because it was good, because every day I did the one thing he was constitutionally incapable of doing, which was to kneel down next to a person the world had stopped valuing and treat them like they still mattered. He'd spent his whole life climbing on top of people, and I'd spent mine sitting beside them. And somewhere deep down, in the part of him he'd never admit existed, he knew which one of us was the better human being, and it ate him alive. It was never about the grant. It was about the fact that the daughter he'd thrown in the garbage had turned out to be worth more than he was. "I didn't destroy you," I said, and my voice was so calm it scared even me. "I just stopped covering for you. There's a difference. You did the destroying years ago. I just stopped being the one who looked away. You think you're so smart." He shook my arm. "Spit flu. You think you've won? I have resources you can't even imagine. I have lawyers. I have a board. I have a reserve fund that you and your little government salary couldn't dream of." He leaned in close, and I could smell the bourbon and the panic on him. "And I have something you want." Something went cold in my chest. I knew before he said it exactly where he was going to go. He pulled out his phone. He held it up so I could see the screen, and his thumb was hovering over a contact, and he smiled at me. It was the worst thing I have ever seen on a human face, that smile. Triumphant and desperate at the same time. "You love your grandmother so much," he said softly. "Your precious Gran. The woman who raised you while your mother was sick. She's a resident at Maplewood, isn't she? Has been for 2 years. His thumb pressed down toward the screen. "It would be a real shame if I called the administrator right now and had her bed reassigned by morning. Private pay's full, sweetheart. People are waiting. 1 phone call and your Gran is looking for somewhere to go in the morning, at 84, in the snow." He let it hang there. He was so sure. You could see it on him. He thought he'd finally found the one button, the one place I was still soft, the one thing that would make me delete the report and crawl back into the basement and be his good quiet failure of a daughter again. I have to tell you, for about half a second, the old me woke up. The 19-year-old with the duffel bag. The little girl who still, God help her, wanted him to love her. And then that half second passed, and I felt almost calm. "Go ahead," I said. "Call Maplewood. Reassign her bed." He blinked. That wasn't the script. "I moved her 3 weeks ago," I said. "The day after I read your survey deficiencies. She's at Brookline now, on the east side. Private pay. A year paid up front, out of the money you said I'd never have. She has a window that gets the morning light, and an aide who actually answers the call light. So go on, call them. Embarrass yourself in front of an administrator who already got a visit from my office last Tuesday. His arm dropped. The phone hung at his side. How? He started. You assumed I was broke, I said. You've assumed I was broke for 10 years. You built your whole picture of me out of a girl who left with $1,100, and you never once updated it. Because updating it would have meant admitting I'd survived without you. So you never saw any of it coming. None of it? That's not my fault, Dad. You just stopped looking at me a decade ago and never started again. He let go of my arm then. He took a step back. And he made one last move, the only one he had left, which was to get bigger, louder, to fill the hallway with himself, the way he filled every room. You have no idea what I am capable of, he said, and his voice climbed back toward its old register. The boardroom voice, the voice that had won him everything. You think one bad night ends me? I have a reserve fund. Off the books. A rainy day account your auditors will never find. I've been moving money for 15 years, you stupid girl. I fly to Scottsdale on the company card and call it a site visit. I expense this party as donor cultivation. $40,000 of resident care money bought that ballroom tonight, and there is nothing you can do about it because I am the institution. I am Cedar Hollow. You can't touch me. He was breathing hard. He'd talked himself back up to the top of the mountain. He actually smiled. And I just looked at him, and I reached into my coat pocket, and I took out my phone. I didn't say anything for a second. I let him watch me. Then I turned the screen toward him. It wasn't a recording. He braced for a recording. It was something worse. It was a live call. The screen said in plain white letters, the call timer still running, call in progress 0000947. And under that, the contact name, Agent Doyle, HHS Office of Inspector General. His face fell off. I don't know how else to describe it. The blood went out of it so fast he looked gray, like wet newspaper. He's been on the line since the ballroom, I said quietly. Federal. Health and Human Services, Office of Inspector General. The Fraud and Abuse Division. He heard the part about the reserve fund. He heard the part about the reserve fund. He heard the part about Scottsdale. He heard you say, out loud, that you spent $40,000 of Medicaid funds on a party and called it donor cultivation. I let that land. That's not a loophole, Dad. Diverting federal healthcare dollars for personal benefit is a felony. Several felonies. And you just confessed to all of them, on tape, to the man whose whole job is putting people like you in a cell. You wouldn't, he whispered. I already did, I said. I called him before you grabbed me. You did the rest. He looked at the phone in my hand like it was a live thing, and then his knees went. He didn't fall. Exactly. He sort of folded, sank down against the concrete wall until he was sitting on the floor of his own service corridor in his $1,000 tuxedo, his bow tie hanging loose, an old man on a cold floor. Please, he said, and it was so small. Please, there's money. I can fix this. I have money put away I can give you. I don't want your money, I said. I never did. That was the whole problem. You never could understand a person who didn't want your money. From the phone, very clear in the quiet hallway, a voice said, Ma'am, we're good. Agents are at the ballroom entrance now. You can step away whenever you're ready. I lifted the phone to my ear. Thank you, I said. I'm ready. I walked out the back doors. Behind me, I could hear it starting, the heavy doors at the far end of the corridor. Voices, the particular flat tone of people who carry badges. I didn't turn around to watch. I'd seen enough of him for one lifetime. Outside it was snowing, the first real snow of the year. Fat, slow flakes coming down through the parking lot lights. The cold felt incredible. I stood there for a minute and just breathed it in. And the air didn't smell like his cologne or his bourbon or the bleach in that hallway. It smelled like snow, like nothing, like the beginning of something quiet. I got into my car, the 8-year-old sedan with the dent in the rear door. And I sat there with my hands on the wheel until they stopped shaking. And then I called my grandmother. She picked up on the second ring, the way she always does, like she's been sitting by the phone. "Well," she said. "Just that." "It's done, Gran," I said. There was a long pause. I could hear her television in the background. Some old movie. "And your father?" she said finally. She doesn't call him my father usually. She calls him that man. But that night she said it soft. "He can't hurt anybody anymore," I said. "Not you, not the people in his buildings, not me." She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Your mother would be proud of the woman you turned into. I'm proud of her too. Come for breakfast. I'll make the eggs the way you like." I cried then. Not the ugly kind. The kind that feels like setting something down that you've carried so long you forgot it was heavy. People like my father think the world runs on power, and that power makes you untouchable. They spend their whole lives climbing where the air is thin, looking down, certain that the people below them are too small to matter. They never notice that small is just another word for close to the ground. Close enough to see where the foundations are cracked, close enough to put your hand on the people they stepped over, and close enough, when the time comes, to be the one holding the door open for the people with the badges. I changed diapers. I mopped up after the dying. I held the hands of people the world had decided to forget. And it turned out that was the most powerful thing I ever learned how to do, because it taught me exactly what a person is worth, and exactly what my father wasn't. If someone in your life has decided you're invisible, let them keep believing it. Stay quiet, keep working, keep your eyes open. The ones who never look at you are the ones who never see you coming. And by the time they finally turn around, the floor is already gone from under them, and you're already at the door, walking out into the snow. The thing I keep coming back to, months later, is the brochure burning in my father's fireplace. He thought he was destroying my future that night. What he was actually doing was teaching me the one lesson that built everything after it, that the people who throw you away tell you exactly how little they understand you. He never saw me again after I walked out his door. Not the real me, and that blindness wasn't bad luck. It was a choice he made every single day for 10 years, the choice not to look. And choices like that compound. They always do. He spent a decade building a man who couldn't imagine being beaten by his own daughter, and that man walked straight into a federal investigation because he literally could not conceive that the diaper-changer was holding his fate. So here's what I believe now, having lived it. Nothing I did in that ballroom would have mattered if I hadn't first decided at 19, with $1,100 and a duffel bag, to do work that was actually decent. I held Walter's hand while he died. I learned which residents would cry if you left. That wasn't weakness, the way my father saw it. It was the foundation. You cannot fake the kind of strength that comes from doing right by people when no one is watching and no one is paying you extra for it. That quiet decency became the spine of everything because, when the moment came, I wasn't standing on a lie. I was standing on 11 years of doing the job correctly. But being good isn't enough on its own, and I want to be honest about that. Good people get steamrolled by men like my father all the time. What protected Gran wasn't my kindness. It was that I read his survey deficiencies, understood the law cold, moved her 3 weeks early, and called Agent Doyle before I ever walked into that room. I let my father build his own trap because I was patient enough and sharp enough to see it coming. Decency gave me the reason. Clear thinking gave me the plan. And then there was the part nobody saw, the years nobody applauded. The 90-minute naps in the break room. The off-brand cereal eaten dry on the bus. 3 classes a year because that was all I could afford for a decade, while changing beds with people still in them. That stubbornness, the refusal to quit even when quitting would have been so much easier, is what turned a thrown-away girl into the woman holding the pen. If you're the invisible one in your family right now, the joke at the dinner table, I want you to hear me. Don't waste your energy begging them to see you. Put it into becoming someone, quietly, day after unglamorous day. Do work you can be proud of. Learn things until you understand them better than the people who dismiss you. And don't stop even when no one claps. The world is full of fathers warming their hands over the fires they think they've started. Let them. Keep walking. The door is closer than you think, and the snow on the other side is clean.